Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. We all want responsive websites, and that goes down to the very text that we use. Wouldn't it be great if you could actually have text that would scale as your screen size changes? Well, you actually can in native CSS with something called the clamp function. Let's jump right in. So you see here in my HTML, I've just got H1 through H6 tags, and then a paragraph tag and a small tag. So obviously these are all going to be the exact same default sizes. I haven't set anything here in my CSS, which is just a style tag on the page, but there is a way to actually quickly add this. And to do that, you just have to understand the clamp property. I've got the MDM docs pulled up, and I'll actually walk you through all of this here in a second as well, but let's just talk through it first of all. It tells you that the clamp CSS function clamps a value between an upper and a lower bound. So in other words, you're going to have a value that you're trying to reach, and then a minimum value you're going to allow something to be, and a maximum value. Now, you don't just have to use this on typography. You can use this on an image, on a video. You can use this on a card or something like that, where you're saying, hey, I don't want this thing to get smaller than this amount of pixels or this percentage of the screen or whatever, and I don't want it to get larger than this, but I want it to try to adjust to this dynamic value I'm going to give it in the middle. Now, this clamp function uses two other functions inside of it, essentially. The minimum and the maximum are themselves functions. Now here they're showing you how this actually works. And basically what it's saying here is that the smallest you're going to let this text get is 1 rem. The largest you're going to let it get is 2 rem, and it's going to try to be 10 view width. In other words, it lets you have a dynamic sizing without the use of media queries, as you see right down here. Now, before I show you how to use the clamp function and give you a really easy way to get started, let's actually examine if you can use this today. If I come over here to Can I Use, and we look at the clamp property, so let's come in here, clamp, and you see here it's giving you for all CSS math functions. If you come down here, you get line clamp, and here you get clamp right here on this function itself. You'll notice here that we're at like 90% globally for here, and then this top one about the exact same. Now, if you're using auto prefixers or things like that, the numbers would even be higher, as you can see there down below. But for instance, if I were to look at something like margin, that's at 95%, and I don't know the last time I thought about not using margin. So in other words, once you get around 90%, to me at least, in a lot of the sites I do, that's about good enough for me to use it. Obviously, I'm going to add an auto prefixer or whatever I can for the last several versions, but usually once you're up at that point, you can actually start using this in production. Obviously, you need to examine your own use case. If you're on a team, obviously you need to do whatever your team has, but just so you know, this is kind of where stuff stands as of the making of this video. All right, so let's go ahead and pull this up. I've just got this open with live server. We're going to grab the H1. Now, we'll say font size, and here clamp is the function. We're going to give it 3 values once again. So let's say something like the smallest it should be is 2 rem, and then a comma, and I'll say something like this. Let's do like 4 view width, and then you can do math directly in here. You don't have to wrap it in like a calc function or anything like that. So we'll do plus 1 rem. All right, and then finally, I'll come up here and say this could be like 5.5 rem. Now, if I save this, you're going to see that it expands. And now if I come all the way down here, you see how it's shrinking. And as I pull up larger and larger and larger, that font size just continues to increase until it locks in at that 5.5 rem size. Now, I've typically found that when you're doing typography, it's helpful to add plus 1 rem or some kind of rem unit to a dynamic unit, like a view width. And that way you're making sure that the font size is always readable or legible. And then you can just make sure to cap it here. Now, obviously, if you're never making it to where it can get down to 2 rem, then a lot of the clamp functionality is kind of gone and out of the window. But you can see at its most basic, clamp is really easy to understand and to use in practice. You don't have to use any weird media queries or complicated Sass mix-ins. All right, now I promised an easy way to get started, so let me talk you through that. First of all, there's this new open props framework, and I did a video on this recently, but they have a bunch of properties already ready with these clamp properties built in. So for instance, if I come down here to typography, they've got some basic font scaling set up already. Right here, this is just using normal sizing of fonts, but then they also have these fluid fonts. And you see they're doing exactly what we just did. They're giving it a minimum value, they're getting it a value that's flexible according to the view width, and then some kind of maximum value. Now, if you're not sure how to use open props, I just did a video explaining it, and you can grab a link to it in the description. Now, you might say, well, I don't want to use a whole framework just to get access to this clamp thing. Is there an easier way to do it? And I'm here to tell you there is. There are at least 2 websites I've seen and used before that are a big help. One of them is called Utopia.fyi. They've got both spacing, fluid spacing for typography and for space itself. Now they work the same way, it's just using the clamp property. And in fact, they actually have fallback for older browsers if you want to use that. What you'll do here is just say, hey, here's the size of the viewport I want to start at. So let's say you're saying, let's do something like 18 pixels at the smallest, and you're going to scale it up by maybe a major or perfect fourth. All right, and then I'll come over here and say, that's fine, 1,140 pixels for the largest width, and I want this to go up to maybe 26. And again, I'm going to come in here, and this time let's do a little bit smaller scale for the larger screens. Now, as I come down this way, you're going to see that it actually gives me what each of these are going to be in pixels from smallest to largest. And because they're using different scales for the small viewport width and the large viewport width, that will obviously scale a little bit differently. Now, coming down here, you'll notice that they've got all this just written in for you dynamically. Now, they're using a bunch of really complicated stuff because this was before Clamp was really readily available in pretty much all browsers now. But with a simple little check mark at the top here, you can just use Clamp, and it gives you all of this right here. Now, if you want to see what this looks like, you can visualize the scale, and it actually shows you exactly what this should look like, previewing at exactly whatever your browser window is. And as you move this, it's going to show you what that looks like. But you can adjust the scaling if you want to up above. Now, all you would do is then copy all of this in, and these are just using standard CSS variables. You would add this to a root like this, and then you would just reference these variables in your fonts, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But there's another website I found that I like even more than this Utopia.fyi, and that is called modernfluidtypography.vercel.app. It's created by somebody named Adrian, and while it doesn't quite have the flexibility of Utopia.fyi, it does have a really nice visual indicator down below. So all you do is say, hey, here's my font root size here, the minimum I want it to be, the maximum I want it to be, and then you can actually set this fluid size. And as you set it, you're going to see the chart down below adjust. And so you're seeing exactly how that's going to move. So if you have a problem, it's going to tell you that, but let's put it at 1. And then you can come down here and see a whole graph and actually drag your thing and say, okay, at 780 pixels, it'll be 24 pixels. And then as you move up, it's just going to tell you exactly how that's actually going to render. And you finally lock in at 72 pixels, right at 5,611 pixels wide on a screen. Now, of course, you're never probably going to get that big, so you probably want to lock it in more around right here. Well, that's easy enough to do. You can just move this around, and you can adjust this right here. And as you play with this, again, the graph down below just adjusts. Now you can click this table and actually see how everything looks. Once again, it's telling you the screen size, the fluid size value, all of that just built in. And when you're ready with all of this, you can go ahead and copy this out and then paste it in over this way. Now, it doesn't actually assign variable names to it, but I think as far as visualizing what it looks like, this is a great website. Now, when it comes to a whole fluid typography scale, let's go ahead and just use this one since it's pre-built for us. Even though we don't get that nice visualization, we do actually get to set up an entire typography scale right off the bat with no work on our part. So I'm going to grab this and paste it back in, and then we'll just reference each of these CSS variables below. So I'll do the first one, and then I'll speed up the video so you don't have to watch me do all of these. So the way you reference a CSS variable is with the var keyword, and then we'll just say step, and you see it's already giving me these in VS Code, step 5, just like that. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy these down and do the rest, and I'll be right back with you. All right, so I've added all those in there. You'll notice that I didn't actually end up using the smallest one, and both the paragraph tag and the heading 6 are the same size, but that's just what I would probably do in a case like this. But now I can come over here, and you're going to see that they're now all scalable. So as I come down here, you're going to see that these get a lot bigger. So as I come down here, you're going to see the size that they're going to be at mobile. And as I expand this up, they're all going to expand and lock in at whatever their max size is for that variable. They're following that ratio I set up either of a perfect fourth or I don't remember what the other one was, but they're following those depending on the size of screen that they're on. Now again, like I mentioned, you can use this for anything, not just typography. So you could use this for images, you could use this for cards, anything on your site that you want to scale visually with a viewport without having to set up a bunch of complicated media queries. If you want help building out just some padding or spacing or things like that, this Utopia.fyi has the exact same thing, this fluid space calculator, and they kind of talk you through what this would look like, and they give you two options. You can either use one that's not quite as dramatic, or you can use one right here that's quite a bit more dramatic, and you can just add extra sizes to them however you want, like this, and it will just continue to add them, and then everything is down here below. You can use this fallback, or you can go ahead and use clamp, and they give you both options here. So it's going to provide all this for you, and then you can just customize this however you want in your actual code. Well, I hope this was a huge help. If you have any questions, let me know. In the meantime, I hope I helped up your fluid typography game, and I will catch you in the next one. Happy coding.